Hi, this is Dave Bunyard, the producer of Life at 100 Megahertz. This episode introduces a theory about Schwann cells. Some 20-odd years ago, I was in my anatomy class in my clinical massage program. We learned that when nerves squirt acetylcholine on the muscles, they cause muscles to contract. The instructor explained how Schwann cells wrap around the nerves that contract the muscle. Well, I came to discover that the Schwann cells were made of white matter, the same white matter that contains memory in your brain. It made perfect sense to me. Muscles are just meat with no thought. It was the nerves that made the muscle move, and it was the Schwann cells that remembered how it moved. To me, it explained how folks do repetitive tasks without thinking about it. I've had conversations about this issue with folks in the medical field. They all, including AI, said the same thing. They said that the Schwann cells were used to accelerate the signals from the nerves to the brain, and that was it. So I challenged AI to think of it in terms of a master server and a relay database of information that can be reset. And I came up with this podcast. I hope that the medical community might take some serious thought into this information and see how it might help Parkinson's patients and other neuromuscular issues. I hope you enjoy this.
You know that feeling when you're typing on a keyboard and you aren't even looking at the keys?
Oh, yeah, like your fingers just have a mind of their own.
Right. They just know exactly where the letters are. Or, it's like swinging a golf club or riding a bike. We always just call it muscle memory.
Which is a great term, but, the standard story we've all been told about it is actually somewhat flawed.
Yeah, because we've always been taught that this memory lives entirely in your brain, right? Like the brain is the boss, sitting up there in your skull, barking orders down the telephone lines of your nervous system.
Exactly. Telling your muscles exactly what to do.
But what if that whole top-down picture is just completely backwards? For a century, medical science basically treated the nervous system like a bunch of dumb copper wires.
They really did. Just passive cables.
Right. But today, we're doing a deep dive into some truly fascinating source material regarding 2026 medical science. Specifically, we're looking at things like circuitry medicine and this concept of the bionic reset.
And this material completely dismantles that old idea.
It really does. Our mission today is to show you that the nervous system in your limbs isn't just a passive cable. It's actually an intelligent local network that physically stores your habits.
It really is a massive paradigm shift. We've always found comfort in the idea of the brain as the undisputed CEO of movement.
Sure, it makes intuitive sense.
Right, but when you look at the biological reality of what we now call relay memory, that dictatorship model just completely falls apart.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I love the analogy the sources use here. It's basically how computer networks operate.
Oh, the edge computing analogy, yes.
Yeah. So if the brain is the master server, then the peripheral structures out there in your limbs are acting like edge routers.
Which is brilliant because in the tech world, an edge router caches data locally. So the whole network runs faster.
Right. Like you don't want to go all the way back to a master server in California every time you load a web page in New York. You cache the data locally.
Exactly. And it sounds like our bodies figured out edge computing long before Silicon Valley ever did.
That is just wild to me.
Well, it's true, because the hardware actually changes the moment you leave the central nervous system. Inside your brain, the white matter, the insulation that wraps your neural connections, is created by cells called oligodendrocytes.
Okay, wait. Oligodendrocytes. I feel like I need a medical degree just to pronounce that one.
I know, it's a mouthful. But just picture them like microscopic octopuses.
Octopuses. Okay.
Yeah. So a single one of these octopus-like cells will sit in the brain, reach out, and wrap its tentacles around dozens of different neurons all at once.
Wow. Okay, so it's multitasking.
Very much so. It's a highly efficient way to insulate a very dense, packed space, like the inside of your skull. But the moment the nervous system leaves the spinal cord and travels out into your arms and your legs, that octopus model stops.
So we switch to a different system out in the limbs.
Exactly. Out there in the periphery, an entirely different type of cell takes over, and these are called Schwann cells.
Okay. And based on how specialized local networks work, I'm guessing these Schwann cells aren't wrapping dozens of nerves at once like the octopus ones.
You'd be exactly right. They are incredibly specialized. You can think of them as dedicated one-on-one bodyguards.
Bodyguards, I like that.
Right, because a single Schwann cell wraps around exactly one microscopic segment of one single nerve.
Wow. Just a strict one-to-one relationship.
Yes, and this intense specialization is where relay memory actually happens. When you practice a physical skill over and over, these Schwann cells don't just sit there acting like passive plastic tubing.
They actually do something.
They physically remodel themselves. They thicken their insulation in the myelin to speed up the electrical signal, but they also do something far more complex called nodal tuning.
Okay, hold on. Let's slow down on nodal tuning, because the idea that my arm is physically altering its own microscopic architecture to remember a tennis swing is, it's a lot to wrap my head around.
It's definitely mind-bending.
Yeah. So how does tuning a node actually work?
Well, to understand it, you have to look at how electricity moves through a nerve. The electrical spark doesn't flow smoothly like water in a pipe. It actually jumps along the nerve.
Like skipping over the insulated parts.
Exactly. Between every single Schwann cell on that nerve, there's a tiny microscopic exposed gap. That gap is called a node of Ranvier.
Okay, so a tiny bare spot on the wire.
Right. And that gap is where the spark lands before jumping to the next one. By physically expanding or shrinking, the Schwann cells can actually change the length of those exposed gaps.
So they're changing the literal distance the spark has to jump.
Yes, exactly. And by changing that distance, they can fine-tune the timing of an electrical signal down to the fraction of a microsecond.
That makes me think of like a musician obsessively turning the tuning pegs on a guitar.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
Right, like the Schwann cell is turning the peg on the nerve gap, dialing in the exact tension and timing so the electrical spark hits the bicep or the forearm at the precise microsecond required for a flawless tennis serve.
Yes. The memory isn't just a conscious thought floating in your head. It is the physical microscopic gap itself.
That is just incredible.
And that microsecond timing is the literal difference between a clumsy, uncoordinated movement and the fluid precision of a professional athlete.
The memory is written directly into the thickness of the insulation.
And the physical size of those tuning gaps.
But wait a second. If my arm is out there physically rewiring its own gaps to memorize my physical movements, what stops it from memorizing a bad movement? Or worse, like a biological glitch. If I have a limp or severe tremor from something like Parkinson's disease, isn't this highly efficient local network going to start optimizing for the tremor?
What's fascinating here is that you are hitting on the dark side of neuroplasticity.
The dark side, because it learns too well.
Exactly. The very mechanism that makes us coordinated can absolutely lock us into dysfunction. Let's say a patient spends years experiencing a Parkinsonian tremor. Those local Schwann cells in the arm are constantly firing with that jerky, rapid rhythm. They literally memorize that glitchy, inefficient signal.
Oh no! So they adapt to the glitch.
They do. Over time, the Schwann cells will actually wrap themselves tighter and tune their gaps to make the tremor signals move even faster and more efficiently.
Just because that is the electrical code they're encountering the most frequently.
Right. They're just doing their job, optimizing for the most common code.
Even though it's the wrong code.
Wow.
That explains why unlearning a physical habit or overcoming a motor dysfunction is so agonizingly difficult.
It's an uphill battle.
Yeah, because you aren't just trying to change your mind. You are literally fighting against the physical, structural shape of your arm's internal wiring.
You are fighting the hardware itself. And the implications of this get even more profound when you look at what happens when the hardware is entirely removed.
Wait, removed?
Yeah. Consider the ultimate broken relay. Phantom pain.
Oh, wow. The ghost in the machine.
It is a haunting phenomenon. But the mechanics of it make perfect sense when you view the body as a network.
Okay, so break that down for me.
Think about what happens when a limb is amputated. The relay, the edge router in the arm, is suddenly physically cut off.
Right, it's just gone.
But the master server, the brain, still retains a highly detailed topographical map of that missing limb in the somatosensory cortex.
Okay, so the map is there, but suddenly there is a total vacuum of data.
Exactly. The brain map for that missing hand is receiving absolutely zero input.
So the master server is just sitting there waiting for data from an IP address that doesn't exist anymore.
And the brain abhors a vacuum. Because there is no incoming data to keep that specific brain region occupied, nearby sensory maps start to literally bleed into that empty neurological space.
Wait, like the map for the face or the shoulder just takes over?
Yeah, they bleed over. The brain gets incredibly noisy trying to find a signal. It upregulates its own receptors, becoming hypersensitive, desperately searching for the missing hand.
And I'm guessing that noise isn't pleasant.
It's not. The tragedy is that the conscious mind interprets that internal static, that neurological noise, as a burning sensation, or the feeling of a painfully clenched fist that isn't even there.
It is so much like an old car radio.
A car radio.
Yeah, like when you are driving out of range of your favorite radio station, the radio doesn't just politely go silent.
Oh, I see what you mean.
As the broadcast signal fades, the receiver frantically turns up its own internal sensitivity, searching for the music. It turns up the volume on its own internal static and just blasts you with white noise.
That is a brilliant way to put it.
The brain is turning up the volume on a missing limb, and the static registers as physical agony.
That is exactly what happens chemically. The master server is blasting static because the edge router was disconnected without a proper shutdown protocol.
All right, so if a tremor or a phantom pain is essentially a local edge router refusing to drop a bad code, or a server searching for a lost connection, how do you format the drive?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right, how is modern science deleting the glitch?
Well, it actually starts with a beautifully simple analog precursor from the 1990s.
Analog.
Yeah. Long before we had microchips, Dr. V.S. Ramachandran developed the mirror box to treat that exact phantom pain.
Okay, I've heard of this. You place the intact, healthy hand in front of a mirror and the amputated stump behind the mirror.
Correct. So when you look down at the mirror, the reflection makes it look like you have two perfectly healthy hands.
So you're creating an optical illusion.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then you move the intact hand. When you look in that mirror, your visual cortex sees two healthy hands moving fluidly.
Oh, I see where this is going.
In the human operating system, vision acts as the admin user. It holds the highest security clearance.
Ha! The admin user.
The visual cortex basically overrides the somatosensory cortex and says, look, the hand is right there. It is fine. It is moving perfectly. Stop sounding the alarm.
Wow. So by feeding the brain fake visual data, you satisfy the vacuum, and the brain literally drops the pain map. The phantom cramp just disappears.
Exactly. But, of course, we aren't relying just on optical illusions anymore.
Right, because looking at the landscape of circuitry medicine, the interventions are getting incredibly direct.
Very direct. They're using peripheral nerve stimulators, or PNS,
Yeah.
for chronic pain now.
And these are tiny implants, right, like about the size of a grain of rice, placed directly next to the glitched nerve.
Yes.
But how does an electrical implant actually delete a pain memory?
It comes back to your white noise analogy. The PNS implant sends a gentle, high-frequency electrical pulse directly into the nerve that is stuck in a pain loop.
Okay, so it's injecting its own static.
Precisely. That high-frequency pulse is essentially artificial static. It scrambles the action potentials, the electrical signals traveling up the nerve.
Got it.
Because the signal is now a scrambled, meaningless hum instead of a rhythmic pain pulse, the local Schwann cells stop optimizing for the pain.
Oh, wow. It breaks the loop.
It breaks the loop, allowing the local network to finally format the drive and reset to a neutral state.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. That makes sense for peripheral nerves, but what about the really complex glitches happening deeper in the system, like Parkinson's?
That requires a different approach.
Right. The data points to adaptive DBS or ADBS, and this seems like a massive leap from the older deep brain stimulation methods.
It's a huge leap.
Because from my understanding, the old methods were basically like leaving an electrical light switch permanently stuck in the on position inside the patient's brain.
They really were. The old methods were very blunt instruments. They just flooded the area with continuous electricity, 247, which, caused a lot of side effects.
Makes sense.
But adaptive DBS is a closed-loop system. The implant features AI sensors that actively listen to the brain's electrical chatter in real time.
Listening for what, exactly?
It is listening for a specific biomarker called a beta wave jam.
Okay, but how does the AI know it's a pathological tremor wave and not just, the patient deciding to reach for a coffee cup?
Because the electrical signatures look entirely different. Normal movement requires asynchronous firing, different populations of neurons firing in a complex cascading sequence.
Okay.
A beta wave jam, on the other hand, is pathological synchrony. It is thousands of neurons getting locked into the exact same rigid frequency at the exact same time.
Like they're all shouting the same thing at once.
Yes, it looks like a massive spike on an EEG, and it is the direct precursor to a physical tremor.
So the AI sees this spike.
Right. And the moment the AI detects that synchronous jam forming, it kicks in with a highly precise phase-match counterpulse to neutralize it.
That is literally noise-canceling headphones for your human motor circuits.
It really is.
Like noise-canceling headphones listen to the background drone of an airplane cabin, and they instantly generate the exact opposite sound wave. When the two waves collide, they cancel each other out, and you hear silence.
Exactly the same principle.
The ADBS listens for the tremor wave, fires the opposite electrical wave, and the result is a perfectly still functioning arm. It is debugging the body in real time.
It syncs the master server and the relay seamlessly.
Amazing.
But as incredible as that electrical fix is, we have to address the underlying reality of neurodegenerative diseases.
Because the hardware is still degrading.
Right. Canceling the noise of a glitch is one thing, but Parkinson's isn't just an electrical glitch. The electrical jam happens because the brain's core chemical supply chain has fundamentally broken down.
Right. The brain literally runs out of dopamine. The factory workers have essentially walked off the job.
To understand this solution, we have to look at the root cause inside the factory. Deep in the brain, there is a region called the substantia nigra.
Okay.
This is where your dopamine-producing neurons live. Dopamine is the chemical oil that allows the gears of your motor system to turn smoothly.
Essential oil for the gears. Got it.
But in Parkinson's, a specific protein called alpha-synuclein begins to misfold and clump together inside these neurons.
Wait, alpha-synuclein misfolding, is that like rust forming on the gears?
It is more like the internal structural scaffolding of the cell collapsing in on itself.
Oh, that sounds bad.
It is. These toxic clumps of misfolded proteins are called Lewy bodies. They physically choke the life out of the dopamine neurons until they die.
So the factory shuts down.
Exactly. For decades, medicine could only manage this by sending in synthetic oil drugs like L-Dopa to temporarily lubricate the remaining gears.
A temporary fix.
But the breakthrough we are seeing now, with treatments like Bemdaneprocel, moves us from management to actual reconstruction.
Rebuilding the factory itself using stem cells.
Yes.
But wait, if you are taking laboratory-grown stem cells and implanting them into a patient's brain, doesn't the immune system just attack them as foreign invaders?
Yeah.
How do they actually wire in?
Well, the brain is somewhat immune privileged, which helps, but the real magic is in the type of cells used. Pluripotent stem cells. These are blank slate cells that scientists coax into becoming brand new, healthy, dopamine-producing neurons in a lab.
Okay, so they're custom-made.
Right. And when surgically implanted directly into the putamen, the part of the brain that needs the dopamine, these cells are biologically programmed to reach out and form synaptic connections. They integrate themselves into the existing circuitry.
And you can actually see this happening in real time on a brain scan, right?
Yeah.
F-DOPA PET scans.
Yes, and it is one of the most stunning visuals in modern medicine. F-DOPA is a harmless radioactive tracer that mimics the raw material the brain uses to make dopamine,
Okay, so it lights up the fuel line.
basically. When you inject this tracer and turn on the PET scan, you can literally watch what the brain is doing with it. Before the surgery, the patient's scan shows a dark, empty void where the dopamine factory used to be.
Just darkness.
But months after the stem cell implant, you do the scan again, and those new stem cells grab the tracer. You can watch them light up, glowing bright red and yellow on the screen,
Wow.
proving that the dead part of the patient's brain has officially come back online and is pumping out its own dopamine again.
Okay, but this brings up a massive question.
Let's hear it.
If we successfully fix the master server, like if the brain is producing its own dopamine again and the factory is fully operational, does the arm just magically fix its Schwann cells? Do the edge routers in the limbs automatically get the software update and drop the tremor?
It is the most logical assumption to make, but the answer is a resounding no.
No.
And this is exactly why so many early trials in restorative neurology struggled. You can surgically repair the brain, but the patient might still be shuffling or unable to walk fluidly.
Because the local cache is still full of corrupted data.
Yes.
The Schwann cells in the legs are still physically tuned and thickened for the stiffness of a Parkinsonian state. The insulation is still optimized for the glitch, even though the brain is fixed.
The local network is physically holding on to the trauma of the disease.
Oh.
You have repaired the hard drive, but but you haven't formatted the local edge routers.
That is so crazy.
This is why the ultimate gold standard fix requires a combination of transplants plus robotics.
Robotics, like literal exoskeletons.
Yes. Post-surgery, patients are strapped into robotic exoskeletons. While the new dopamine from the stem cells is finally flowing from the master server, the robot physically forces the patient's limbs through perfect, highly fluid, healthy movement patterns.
Oh, wow. So the robot bends the knees and swings the arms with perfect biomechanical precision.
Exactly. You are physically forcing the Schwann cells to experience a healthy signal. Over time, those cells remodel again. They adjust their tuning gaps.
You are literally writing a new, healthy, fluid memory back into the physical white matter of the limbs.
The hardware has to be physically retrained to listen to the repaired server.
That is just staggering. It really proves how deeply intertwined this system is.
It's all connected.
But, stem cells and exoskeletons are incredible high-tech interventions that require a neurosurgery wing.
Very true.
If someone listening to this right now is just sitting in traffic or out on a jog, how do they access this local network? Can everyday people hack their own bionic reset without a microchip?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The nervous system has built-in biological backdoors. You don't need a microchip to trigger a reset.
Okay, so what's the first backdoor?
The most immediate tool at your disposal is something called the physiological sigh.
Right. 2 inhales followed by a long exhale. But what is the actual mechanism there? Why does breathing in twice reset a nervous system?
It has to do with the physical mechanics of your lungs and the vagus nerve.
Okay.
When you are stressed, your breathing gets shallow, and the tiny microscopic air sacs in your lungs, the alveoli, actually collapse like deflated balloons.
Oh, wow.
When you take a deep breath in and then add that tiny second pop of air right at the top, you force those collapsed alveoli to snap open.
And that snap triggers something in the brain.
It triggers stretch receptors in the lungs, which send a massive immediate electrical impulse up the vagus nerve directly to the brainstem.
The vagus nerve, right?
Yeah, the information highway of your parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest system. That double inhale impulse forces the brainstem to send an emergency reboot signal back down to the heart, instantly slowing your heart rate and clearing neurological static.
It is literally a hardware reboot button sitting in your chest.
It really is.
That's awesome. Okay, the second DIY hack is the cold plunge. Submerging yourself in 50-degree Fahrenheit water. What is the chemistry behind that?
It relies on a profound swing in neurotransmitters. The initial shock of the freezing water triggers a massive release of norepinephrine in the brain, which causes that initial panic and hyperventilation.
Right, that feeling of, I need to get out immediately.
Exactly. But as you force yourself to stay in the water and breathe through it, your brain compensates by triggering a massive, sustained surge in dopamine production.
How much of a surge?
Up to a 300% increase. It floods the entire supply chain naturally. It creates a hard reset for your nervous system, mimicking the focus and clarity you might get from a mild pharmaceutical stimulant, but driven entirely by your own biology.
A 300% surge just from sitting in cold water. I guess I need to start taking colder showers.
It definitely works.
And finally, the third natural reset is Zone 2 cardio.
Right. Zone 2 cardio means moving at a steady, sustained pace where your heart is elevated, but you are still able to hold a conversation.
Okay, so not sprinting, just steady.
Exactly. Exercising in this specific metabolic zone causes your body to heavily produce a protein called BDNF, or brain-derived neurotrophic factor.
White matter fertilizer.
That is a highly accurate description. BDNF stimulates neurogenesis, the creation of new neurons, but it also provides the literal chemical fuel that helps your Schwann cells repair their myelin insulation.
So it's feeding the edge routers.
Yes, it gives the peripheral nervous system the resources it needs to dial in that precise nodal tuning we talked about earlier.
Which brings up a really empowering angle here. The idea of the citizen scientist.
It's so important.
Because if you are out there doing Zone 2 cardio or doing these natural resets, you are generating real-world data. Everyday people holding these local relays in their arms and legs hold crucial insights.
They absolutely do.
You can use your smartwatch to track your arm swing velocity, or use finger-tapping apps on your phone to measure your microscopic motor speed. And you can actually take that data and submit it to the research advocate portals at places like the Michael J. Fox Foundation or the Parkinson's Foundation.
Which completely democratizes the science.
Yeah. Everyday people are the ones providing the massive data sets needed for the next big breakthrough.
A laboratory can only observe a patient for a few hours a month. The continuous real-world data of how a human nervous system degrades, resets, and adapts in daily life is invaluable to training the AI models that will run the next generation of circuitry medicine.
So what does this all mean? If we zoom all the way out, the big takeaway here is that the human body isn't a top-down dictatorship ruled with an iron fist by the brain.
Far from it.
It is an ongoing, highly intelligent, two-way conversation between the master server in your head and the local relays in your limbs.
And realizing that shifts how we view our own autonomy. The bionic reset, whether it is achieved through a peripheral nerve implant, a stem cell graft, or just a physiological sigh, is a reminder that we all possess the biological capability to reprogram our own communication lines.
We aren't stuck with the bad programming.
Right. We are not just passengers in our bodies. We have access to the system administrator controls.
Which brings me to a thought I just cannot shake after going through all this source material. I want to leave you with this to chew on.
Sure.
We talked about how those microscopic Schwann cells are constantly adjusting, constantly thickening their insulation to optimize for the physical movements we repeat the most often. It begs a deeply fascinating question about our daily routines. We sit at our desks, we hunch over our keyboards, we tilt our necks down to stare at our phones for hours on end, and we tell ourselves that we are simply getting used to it. We think it is just a temporary posture.
But the biology says otherwise.
Exactly. Because based on the biology of relay memory, our very cellular hardware is permanently reshaping itself to memorize those specific hunched postures. Your nerves are turning their microscopic gaps to make slouching more physically efficient than standing up straight.
It's a profound and somewhat chilling question to ask yourself.
It makes you wonder, at what point do your daily habits stop being a simple choice and start becoming the permanent physical architecture of your body? Who is really in charge of your life, your conscious mind, or the microscopic edge routers silently hardwiring your every single move?
That is definitely something to think about.
Keep that in mind the next time you reach for your phone. And in the meantime, take a deep physiological sigh right now. 2 inhales, long exhale. Your Schwann cells will thank you. Catch you on the next one.
I hope this episode made sense. Driving a stick-shift automobile generally requires the use of all 4 limbs working together. When you are first learning how to drive, this is a mind-blowing feat of concentration. But I remember that first time when I drove to work in my stick shift, and I didn't have to focus on clutching and shifting and steering to get where I was going. The movements became automatic. I just got there without thinking about it. What was the magic? I had another memory where I worked with someone who had Parkinson's. She walked with a cane, but not as a support, but as a guide. At the bottom of the cane, near the floor, she had a tie wrap that stuck out that forced her to walk over the tie wrap. When she walked over the tie wrap and used it as a guide, she was able to walk much more smoothly. Using her eyes, she was able to focus on walking. But it was as if her legs had lost their own memory. I'm hoping that the medical community can consider this theory on how to reset these relay databases, which we call Schwann cells. See you next time.